Back here on the Cover 3 podcast, live on CBS Sports Network. Well, the undefeated, unanimous #1 Oregon Ducks are traveling to Madison, Wisconsin to play in primetime against the Badgers. Now, it's been an up and down season for Wisconsin. They've become kind of a Mendoza line team. You know, if they are better than you, Wisconsin will win. And if you are better than Wisconsin, well, then you're probably going to get a W against the Badgers. And while that's like easy to sort out, it's not making anybody at Wisconsin real happy. They've had some off-field stuff during this week as well. So if you're Wisconsin going into this game against Oregon, Tom, where do you see the opportunities going up against this Oregon team?
I've talked about it in recent weeks, ever since Oregon got past Ohio State and then even into the Michigan game. They've kind of been playing pretty vanilla on offense. They're not really trying to do anything spectacular because they're looking at their schedule, they're looking at their opponents, and like you're saying, if Wisconsin's a litmus test, I don't think Oregon really needs to take the test to know where it stands. We all know where the Ducks are. So I would expect a very similar kind of approach here because, as you mentioned before the break, it's their 8th straight game without a bye. They're on a road. They've got a bye looming. I think that this is just going to be another instance where they're going to try to get in, win it early, and get out. But that's something Wisconsin can try to take advantage of if they know that is going to be the plan. Because if we've seen anything in recent weeks is as Oregon's kind of kept things basic on defense, Michigan hit some big passing plays against them, and Maryland was hitting some big passing plays against them last week. So if I'm Wisconsin, during my 3-game winning streak, yes, the opponents were not exactly stalwarts or incredible teams, but the Badgers' offense was hitting big plays in the passing game. That's kind of disappeared the last 2 weeks against Penn State and Iowa, who have very good defenses, and Oregon also has a very good defense. But the opportunity has been there. So if I'm Wisconsin and I could try to hit some big pass plays just to give myself a chance at home to get the crowd into it, get points on the board, and put Oregon in a position where it doesn't want to be because it just wants to stay on cruise control, that gives me a chance to kind of disrupt things and maybe pull off an upset. And another side of this equation is defensively, tackle. Because if you look at Oregon's offense, again, they're keeping things very vanilla. As each week has gone on, Dillon Gabriel's average air yards per attempt has shrunk every single week. Last week, it was only about 4.5 yards per attempt. But the one thing the Maryland defense did a great job of, there was no YAC. And Oregon has been living off of YAC for most of the last month. Maryland took that away, and it's what helped keep them in the game until they had 2 interceptions in the second half that completely destroyed their chances of pulling off that upset and made it into the blowout that it was, as Oregon ended up winning by 21. But if Wisconsin can follow that game plan, keep everything in front of them, and force Oregon to put together those long drives to get down the field and get touchdowns and put points on the board, that gives them the chance to stay in this game. So they do have the path, and they can take advantage of Oregon's basically vanilla game plan.
Totally agree with what Tom just said there. I think if you look at this, Wisconsin does have the ability to limit explosive plays, and that is something that Oregon wants to thrive on with YAC, as Tom just said. I would say that there is some chance, I think, that Wisconsin can run the football on Oregon. Now, that was more of a problem earlier in the year than it has been lately. So maybe Oregon has this completely fixed, but maybe they don't. If I'm Wisconsin, I'm looking to play this game at my tempo. I'm looking to run the football, and I'm looking to see if my home crowd can actually help me out. Now, Oregon has really only played, at least for my money, like one real road game. To go into this edition of Purdue, to me, doesn't truly count. Going to Michigan does, though. And Michigan crowd was fired up, at least at first, and obviously not as much in the fourth quarter. But we saw it with Penn State, and Penn State had great perseverance and composure, even when Drew Aller got hurt, right? They're playing pretty well, but the breaks are not going their way. Every Wisconsin punt is being down inside the 5. You know, Penn State, like the field position for the Nittany Lions was terrible. Penn State drops a pretty wide open touchdown pass, got to settle for a field goal. And all of a sudden, like, Wisconsin's up. Now, Penn State came back, they had composure. They finished Wisconsin off because they have better athletes at almost every position, so they should win, just as Oregon should. But I think if you're Wisconsin, you find a way to play within yourself. Maybe you're going to need Oregon to play like it's C or D game. If Oregon shows up with its A game, I don't really care what game Wisconsin brings because you're not going to beat that. But if Oregon's a little off, you get the home crowd going, you're able to run the football on them some, maybe you pop an explosive or two. It's not that crazy in 2024 college football to see Wisconsin actually pulling this off.
this is the game where I know we use that term like upset alert, like watch out, better watch out for this game. I think this is one that you should put Oregon on upset alert. Not calling it. I'm not saying that Oregon's going to lose, but to Bud's point, if they don't show up ready to go, which is human nature, it happens to a lot of teams we've seen, number one ranking, it's unanimous. Everyone's already putting them in the playoffs. Who are you playing in the Big Ten title to kind of let off the gas a little bit? And then you get Wisconsin off a bye week feeling healthy. The only thing that I wonder about Wisconsin is where are they mentally right now? That was an ugly loss to Iowa. It's a long week of practice. You just want to get back on the field, but like they're going to have that home field advantage and they're going to have to have performance for the ages. What I'm worried about is I do think their best chance of success is stopping the run, but they haven't had much success doing that. They're giving up 4.73 yards per carry. That's 100th in the country. It's not very good. But like load up the box. Their secondary is probably their strength of this defense. So challenge them. And without Tez Johnson, maybe that's one of the things that's been missing for Oregon in that deeper pass game is that deep threat capability. So that puts more pressure on Evan Stewart and Trayshawn Holden and some of the younger guys and see if Dillon Gabriel can do it. Maybe they can, and they probably can if they want to. They haven't shown it, but those are less, high percentage completions, making them throw the ball down the field. So I'm curious to see like what version of Wisconsin we get. And if they can slow down Jordan James in that run game, I think that's their best chance of success. The other thing is, I don't know, Oregon's defense has actually been so impressive. That's the side of the ball that I'm curious to see if Braden Locke can throw it, if he can get those big plays, because I don't know if he's going to have time to do it.
Oregon was not buttoned up against Maryland by Dan Lanning's own admission. It was a little bit sloppy. The execution was a little bit poor. Oregon had 12 penalties for 95 penalty yards, but 7 of those led to Maryland first downs. We're talking like defensive pass interference on 3rd down, roughing the punter on 4th down, a defensive holding call in the end zone. Just some sloppiness around the edges, and maybe they were distracted. Maybe it's sort of been a long run, but as you are going into Camp Randall on a Saturday night at the end of this long run, not to go total vibes here, but like a mental focus has got to be there to not be able to give a Wisconsin team that does not have as much talent the opportunity to build some confidence. Now, Oregon does have a tremendous amount of talent, and they have a lot of talent and experience at the quarterback position. So maybe, I guess, not necessarily within this game, but if we were to just take a check-in, a snapshot of what we've seen over the last couple of weeks, Danny, the quarterback, Dillon Gabriel, he is still, in those conversations for, the biggest awards that are available for a quarterback, the Heisman Trophy, top quarterback, Big Ten Player of the Year. What have you seen from Gabriel that is positive that could really help Oregon if they do find themselves in an upset alert type situation?
So here's what I trust in him the most is the leadership that he brings. Like we're talking about the potential let up. I think he's the guy that you kind of rely on as a mature player who's been around a long time to not let guys goof around, because that's the tendency, is for guys to want to go out on a Thursday night before the game. You might have a little bit more of a tendency to kind of get lackadaisical at practice. And it's one thing for the coaches to yell, but it's another one for a leader and a quarterback to do that. So that's what I've kind of expected him. That's why I do trust this team. But I also think what we've seen from Dillon Gabriel in this whole business-like approach that they've had is he's just positioning himself, doesn't make that big mistake that, the recipe for an upset is a quarterback gets sloppy, gives him a pick six, throws a couple interceptions, coughs it up. I don't think you get that from Dillon Gabriel. And if you do, if something happens, it's just he's elevated every single time. And the thing that's really hurting him and his Heisman chances is the fact that they have been so good. Like, it doesn't make any sense. You're playing this well, but like, where's the Heisman moment outside of the Ohio State game? He's just been good. And he was great in that game, but they haven't needed him to be great. And they probably won't need him to be great again until the Big Ten championship game in the playoffs. But over these next 2 games, I don't think you'll see much out of Dillon Gabriel, much more of what you've been seeing him, which is very efficient, very smart, and being an outstanding game manager, which I think is a good compliment for Dillon Gabriel.
Danny, to that, I would add that Dillon Gabriel seems to, and look, a lot of these Oregon receivers this year have been in and out of the lineup with injury, but I think just understanding what the system is that Oregon is running, Gabriel seems to be playing with a lot more confidence. He's not a guy who has some exceptional arm. And so that means the ball has to really come out on time if Oregon's going to make those explosive plays with some of those shorter and intermediate throws and turn them into big plays like Tom discussed in segment 2 today when we were previewing that game. So when I look at it, like, it just seems like the comfort level that he has in his offense is so raised from where it was early in the season because the ball is out on time. Even go back to that Michigan State game. That pick he throws right before halftime to the wide side of the field, that's not a ball that, like, with his arm talent, that he probably should throw, but he definitely shouldn't throw it late like he did. Now, in recent weeks, he's not been doing that as much. The ball's out on time, it's in rhythm, and when Oregon gets all these receivers back, I think they're really dangerous.
You know, we talk about Dillon Gabriel and his Heisman chances and the lack of the Heisman moment. I think the most impressive thing about Dillon Gabriel to me is I don't think he cares about winning the Heisman. I think if you look at how Oregon is approaching the game, again, I'll say it again, like, they've been very vanilla. And Dillon Gabriel is very happy to play within what they're trying to do. You could see a lot of quarterbacks who maybe are sitting there worrying about their stats or worrying about trying to win a Heisman, maybe making throws that aren't there just to try to force it. Gabriel's happy taking what they're giving him right now because he knows his team is winning games. And I think that his priority is win the Big Ten, get to the playoff, win a national title. I don't think he cares about the Heisman. And I think a lot of that comes with the maturity and the experience because if you look at it a lot, like I said, younger quarterbacks are going to take risks. Dillon Gabriel knows that all he has to do is not screw up, and Oregon is going to win most of these games, and he is content to just not screw up. He had, like, that pick six you mentioned against Michigan State, but early in the year he was making mistakes, but he was also learning a new offense and new teammates. Last few weeks, he hadn't turned the ball over. He hadn't put up exceptional stat lines, but he's kept control of the ball. He's kept his team on the field, and he's put points on the board. Everything you want a quarterback to do. And ironically enough, by not caring about winning the Heisman, if Oregon keeps winning, they win the Big Ten. Guess who might win the Heisman? Dillon Gabriel.
Great point, because you beat Wisconsin, you're going to be playing in the last game before Heisman ballots are due. That 8 p.m. Saturday night primetime window in the Big Ten championship. If you're a top 2, top 3 contender going into that game, then you can not only go win the trophy that goes to the Big Ten, you can not only win a bye in the college football playoff, you might be able to win the Stiff Arm Trophy as well. Well, coming up on the other side, it's not a big game with massive implications, but it's a pressure-packed game for two proud programs with a lot of turnover. We'll get into all that around USC and Nebraska next.